Thanks, Jay. Good point.
You ready?
Yes, go for it.
All right, let's call the Monday, August 17th, 2020 meeting of the Oxford Historic Preservation Commission to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, and I think everyone should see we have the consent agenda added. We had a pretty full schedule tonight, and a few of the cases were pretty minor changes, and so with the exception of case number 586, which I have to recuse myself from, we will approve the item on the consent agenda by consent. So, should I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved. Kathy Allen.
And a second?
Yeah.
I think holding up a two. Maybe Corey, you may need to mute. Corey, I think we're hearing. You may need to mute for right now. Thank you. All right, all in favor of approval of the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I have to recuse myself from 590.
Is that on the
consent? Yeah, I don't know how that works, but.
Kate, do
Yes.
we need to move that one as well?
Hang on one second.
So for 590 as well, this is Joel.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, we had some confusion with council earlier and us about how the consent agenda is going to work. So yes, we will need to remove 529 North Lamar and 508 North Lamar from the consent agenda and have them as public hearings since commissioners are recusing. And then Joel will also be recusing from case number 587, which is already on the regular agenda for 1010 Washington Avenue. So that will leave on the consent agenda case number 584 and case number 591. Does that make sense?
Okay. So let's reapprove the agenda as amended to remove cases number 586 and case number 590 from the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So just to clarify, we'll be hearing those first for the regular agenda.
So moved. Kathy Allen.
And a second?
Second, Kent.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sir Francis, this is Jack.
Aye.
I'm in the meeting now.
Great. Well, okay. So next on the agenda is approval of the minutes from July 20th, 2020. Any additions or corrections? Hearing none, do I hear motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Jack.
Second?
Second, Kent.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes from July 20th are approved. All right, next on the agenda is our consent agenda, and it will be just the cases number 584, which I hope everyone had a chance to look at case number 584, where we had a needlepoint image of the house that had appeared about 30 years ago. And case number,
591.
what was the other one? 591. And these were some changes to a previously approved COA. And so, Kate, do we move to accept the consent agenda?
Yes.
Is that how that works?
Mhm.
All right. Do I hear a motion?
If any commissioner wishes to pull one off to discuss, they may. But, or if there's someone, a member of the public who would like to speak on it.
Okay, anyone have any concerns or questions about those two cases? All right, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Kent.
And a second?
Second, Joel.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved. Okay, so that means we would go next to case number 586. And I have to recuse myself from this one, so I'm going to disappear. Diane, can you handle case 586 for me?
I don't believe that Diane joined
she
the
not here?
meeting, so
Camp?
Let's see. I don't know that I have it pulled up. Let me see if I can find the agenda.
oh, Diane's on the line. Hang on, I'm admitting her from the lobby. Diane, are you there?
I am. Well, you're here just in time to take over case number 586 for us. I have to recuse myself.
Okay, let me turn to 586.
Okay. And I'm about to disappear. Let's see.
And so to all commissioners who are going to be recusing today, that means you turn your video and microphone off so that you're not participating at all in the meeting. And then you can come back in once the case is over. Just because I know Virginia and Joel are going to be recusing later.
Okay, so we have case number 586. Who will be here to represent this case?
I am, if it's my case, I'm not looking at the agenda,
It's you, Jay.
Ren Green.
No, it's Jay Hughes for 508 North Lamar Boulevard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Okay.
And who are you? Because I can't see.
Well, so my name's Jay Hughes, and I am the backdoor neighbor. Our backyards abut each other, and I'm just helping Miss Sharon Tidwell. Her mother was Miss Jewel Lynch, a dear friend of ours. She lived in that house from '86 when it was built until earlier this year when she passed away at 103 years old. And now her daughter is moving into the house with her husband. And the house hasn't been touched since 1986 in terms of amenities being updated. And they have requested to go ahead and extend that little balcony over to each side and then to replace and update the front doors with a 6-light configuration.
Okay. The proposed materials for the porch, I see, will be matching the existing,
Yes, ma'am.
and the new doors will be wood and glass.
Yes, ma'am, and high quality, nice solid wood doors.
Does anybody have anything to say about this site? You can turn your mic on if you do. I'm looking at the staff recommendation, and they do suggest approval for this. If you'll give me a minute, I didn't realize I would be.
Oh, that's okay, Diane. I can speak for staff. Since the building was, a later addition in the historic district, and the materials are compatible, we felt that it was appropriate to recommend approval here.
Well, I don't see anything that would stop me from agreeing with you. Does anyone else have anything to add about the addition of the balcony and the changing out of the door? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve it.
This is Jacob. I make a motion to approve.
And do we have a second?
Second, Kathy Allen.
Instead of saying everybody in favor, I think I'd prefer to say anyone opposed at this time, because we can't, I wouldn't recognize everybody's voice. So is anyone opposed? Okay, then the motion stands for applicant 586. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a good meeting.
Thank you, Jay.
So how do we get Sarah Francis back?
She should be able to hear.
Here, I'm coming.
Okay. Sarah Francis, that motion was approved without any comment.
Got it. Great. Okay, next on the agenda, we have case number 590, and let's see, Joel and Virginia both need to recuse themselves.
That is correct, Joel and Virginia. So you guys,
Are they muted and gone?
I would hope so.
Okay, I think I'm looking at someone's desktop. This is case 590, yes.
Got it, thanks.
We're taking the ones that were originally on that consent agenda first.
Got it, thanks.
Okay. All right, so case number 590, who do we have here to speak?
Jonathan should be on the line.
I'm here.
Okay,
Hi,
great.
Jonathan.
Hi.
Okay.
So this project has two basic components. One is adding a fence and a gate across the driveway, which the previous commission had approved for the former owner, but our design is a little bit different and time has passed, so we're representing that for you. And also a small kind of turnaround and parking space in the front yard.
Okay, and everybody should see pictures of the gate. And we did, when we approved it before, was it going to be wooden, I think, maybe?
That's right, it was a white wooden fence.
Yeah. And there is already existing iron fence on the other side, so it isn't introducing something, really new.
That's correct. And in fact, the neighbor just to the south, which will be very close to where this gate is, also has an iron fence across their property to their house. So it's very consistent with what's happening on this property and nearby.
And then it just looks like a parking pad in the front, brick border, and a little brick walkway. Is the walkway that's there brick or concrete? I can't remember.
There isn't a walkway now that connects the driveway to the walkway that goes out to the street, but the one that goes out to the street is concrete.
It's concrete, okay. All right.
And then the steps up to the house are brick.
Or brick, okay.
So there's a kind of a combination of materials there already.
All right, does anybody have any questions or need any clarification? Any concerns? All right, do I hear a motion to approve?
I so moved. Diane.
The second?
Jacob for the second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, Mr. Maddox. You are approved, case number 590.
Thank you.
And let's see, Joel and Virginia can come back. All right, so next on the agenda, we have case number 587.
So
And I'm
Corey,
pulling it up right
are you
now.
here?
Corey, you may still be muted.
I believe I'm here.
Here you are. All right. So we previously approved a design, so maybe just walk us through what's different. Or is that the, no, this is a different one. That's Washington. Sorry, I thought I was on Hayes. I pulled up the wrong one. Okay, yeah, this is Washington Avenue. Gotcha.
This house was built, I believe, in the 90s by Joel. There's some railings missing, and we want to infill those on the front and on the side.
Mm-hmm.
The porch of the front porch that wraps around is got a plywood ceiling with some screen molding on it. We want to put a groove ceiling in and paint it roughly the same color. As you see on the south elevation, we're taking a window out and putting a new window in. Other than that, we're taking a screened room that's there now and turning it into a heated and cooled space. The lower floor is just under the upper floor space, and so we're going to fill it in and turn it into another little small little living game room kind of area. So basically, we're not doing anything to the exterior of the walls anywhere around other than infill from screen to glass or from nothing to glass and brick.
Yeah, and I should add to this house, there's a side street, but you really see that east side because of trees and landscape and stuff. All right, anybody have questions?
Have the windows been approved?
And we have, I'm just reading through, the materials are appropriate. Yeah, and no additional space, so you're just taking in space that's already there.
So maybe Diane is referring to the staff report. We recommended approval with the condition that the new windows are going to be true or simulated divided light. Corey didn't provide the window specs, and that's a big part of the window guidelines, is that they are true or simulated divided light. So that's the only condition of staff approval. The only condition proposed by staff.
Corey,
I'm in support of that as well. No problem at all. It's designed as a Pella Architect Series door and transom configuration.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Any discussion? All right, do I hear a motion to approve case number 587 with the windows and doors as discussed?
This is Jack. I so move.
And I second Diane.
Uh-oh. Hang on, I think I need to call in. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, do I hear a motion to approve with the condition that the windows are as discussed?
This is Jack. I move that we approve with the discussion.
This is Kathy, I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, case number 587 is approved.
Thank you.
Y'all are breaking up a little. I may have to call in. Let's keep trying. All right, next on the agenda is case number 589, COA requested by Dr. Lawrence to build a garage 416 North 11th Street.
Yes, this is Corey. We came before the commission and received the COA for a different scheme that required some variances, and we did not receive the variances, so the Lawrences and I regrouped and came back with a version of a garage which required a variance as a caveat. They changed proportions of the garage from a 2 to a 1. Reconfiguration upstairs, and I believe this is compliant with all the land development codes other than a COA.
Okay, so this has been approved by the planning commission, or does it still have to go to the planning commission after the changes?
My understanding is that we don't require any variances to build this from the land development code.
But Sarah Francis, there will be a planning review when he comes in for his building
Does
permit.
it need? I guess my question was, isn't it adding an apartment? Is that something that needed planning commission approval or not? It may not.
The accessory dwelling unit.
Hey, Corey, is there an accessory dwelling unit upstairs?
No, I'm not sure we had one before, but that was the conversation that we were having. I'm not sure we have it resolved. That if the floor plan, when it pops up, you'll see that there's no exterior door that goes in or anything. There's no exterior stairs.
So Sarah Francis, to answer your question, and I did take a look at this. Corey's right; it would not require any variances that I could find. If it does need a some sort of an action either through a special use for an accessory dwelling, I mean, I think that that's something that staff is going to be supportive of, and it's either a special use or a special exception. So I think what Corey has here is, it's compliant with the land development code from, the location and the proximity to the property line and the setback line, et cetera.
Any further questions from commissioners? Is there anybody from the public that wants to speak on this case? Okay.
All right. All right. So hearing no discussion, do I hear a motion to approve?
This is Diane.
Sarah Francis, I'm sorry, I didn't realize we passed the discussion point. Could I just make a
brief
Well,
comment?
I'm sorry.
Hello?
Jack, why don't you go ahead and, if you have a point of discussion, go ahead with it. I think Sarah Francis is having some technical problems.
I'm cutting out.
My comment was, I voted against.
I'm trying to.
Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
I was just going to comment. I voted not in favor of this when it was presented originally, because I just think because of the size of the existing house and the location, that any addition affects the rhythm of the neighborhood. So I understand they have gotten the planning approval, but I will be voting against it again this time for the same reason. I just think the existing house dominates that area so much that any addition of any size would be more than I would approve.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Any other comments by commissioners?
I voted against it last time too, and I will vote against it as well this time for the same reason. Thank you.
And that's Camp?
And I'm back. Sorry. I'm trying doing a hotspot. Yeah, I am concerned about, just the size, and putting more on that lot.
Is there anyone in the neighborhood that is against this?
We did not receive any comment at the city. And as you guys know, the signs out in front of the house. The notice.
Right. I will say the positive, the good thing about it is it is in the most, unobtrusive spot. But it is a lot of house right there. All right, further discussion. Okay, do I hear a motion to approve case number 589?
I do make that motion, but I make it knowing that A, there's no one in the neighborhood that is objecting, and B, that it's followed the proper channels of going through all the different city agencies, and nothing red flag has popped up. Therefore, I make that motion.
And being sure all of that's in the minutes. And do I hear a second?
I would make a second, and I'll just make a comment too to piggyback off of Diane that I agree with the staff that the addition will not have a discernible visual impact on the character of the historic district. I don't have a basis to strongly disagree with that, and I second the motion to vote for it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, is that everyone?
Yeah, so the motion passes.
All right, case number 589 passes. All right, thank you. Corey, I think we'll...
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, next on the agenda is public hearing for case 588 by Jay Luna. And this is for a new construction on Pierce Avenue, and I believe we just got a new image of that one, right?
I emailed you guys some updated elevations that I received from Jay today, and so those are going to be the elevations that show the building without the two-story garage. So I'm gonna go ahead and get on those. If you guys wanna see the site plan, let me know and we'll go over to the other file. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen, just give me 1 second.
And this is the house that had to be torn down because of a safety, issue. Was this the one, the car?
Yes, it's in the staff report. I don't recall the exact month, but it was during or directly before the pandemic, and a car hit the building and it was knocked off its foundation.
And so it's an empty lot.
It's an empty lot, right at the end of Pierce, right before you enter that curve.
I rode by it. It looked like a very small lot.
Pretty small.
Sorry guys, there's something going on with my connection. Are they still there? Can anybody hear me?
No, we've been disconnected. Hey, Chris, it all went to hell in a handbasket. The meeting just dropped.
Hi guys, it looks like we were all disconnected. Sorry about that. Is everybody there? Let's see, let me look at the list.
I'm back.
Okay, great.
Did we all I'm back too.
Molly just said it's intermission. Yeah, on my computer. Okay, let's see. Hey guys, we're not hearing you, so you might want to hold off.
Hey, can you hear me? Hey, just give us 1 second. We're reconnecting. Get the audio back up.
Welcome to the
If you're the meeting organizer, press star now.
You are now joining the meeting. Please wait for the leader to admit you to the meeting. Thank you for your patience. You are now joining the meeting.
This meeting is being recorded and or transcribed.
Can you hear us now? Great. Thank you.
Okay, and it looks like everyone is here. We will try to go back to those plans. Okay, so you guys should be seeing the front elevation. Jay, maybe you want to talk about the project?
Yes, I appreciate the introduction. My name is Jay Luna, and proposing the single-story new construction home at 1416 Pierce. Obviously, I'd like to thank y'all for having this meeting and allowing us to present it and point out a few things. If now's a good time to point out a few things that I'd like just to bring up, see what y'all's opinions are. One thing is the topography on the front of this lot kind of slopes off toward the street. So when I was out there yesterday, I was thinking that it might be a good idea to have a elevated front porch with a few short brick pillars under the front porch columns, maybe just a couple of feet off the ground that front porch would be. So I guess throw that out there. And then on the left elevation, there's no windows shown on that bedroom because the two bedrooms on that left side have windows in the front and rear. But right where the C's are marked as the veneers on the side of that building, I was thinking about possibly adding bedroom windows in there just to really get some light on that side of the house. But yes, other than that, the garage and a single unit above the garage was eliminated due to lot size and that garage just overpowering such a small lot.
Okay, and Jay, I'll go to the site plan just so they can see that as well.
Okay.
So is that parking for 3 cars?
It would be. It would be for 3.
It's the square footage of the house.
I think it's right at 1900 or 1950, I believe. It's under 2000 for sure.
And the windows that you had marked with the C, would that be north, facing north?
That's correct. And they would match the other bedroom windows. It would be a 6/6 wooden mahogany window.
So are we to assume that you are planning on putting the windows in, or you're just throwing that out to see what we think about?
I'm just throwing it out as a suggestion. I just noticed it. I don't know how it skipped me this entire time, but I thought it would be a good addition.
So I suppose any motion, if you were to motion to approve here, you guys could ask him to come back with that revised elevation or delegate approval of the new elevation with window placement to staff. So just keep that in mind.
Hey, Jay, I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. A little bit off topic, but you're still in Dead Man's Curve there, man. Have you talked to the city about doing anything to prevent lightning from striking twice down there?
I did think about it. It crossed my mind, but I guess maybe a guardrail or something would help. But I guess that house was there for a long time, so maybe I'm going to take my chances on that.
Okay.
Is it in the same big footprint as the house that was there?
I'm not positive about that because I was not familiar with the previous home.
Kate, do you know? Right, just roughly.
It's obviously not the exact footprint because it's, you know, a different style of house, but there was a 1-story house there. It was
I was just wondering if this one's a little farther back or.
I think in regards to front to back, just based on me being out there on the site and where the previous sidewalk was and where you could tell the old one was demolished, the front of this house is in close proximity to where this one will sit. And I think this one's a little bit wider left or right than the other one.
So you mentioned also raising the front elevation a little bit. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
We can. The front elevation shows that front porch is on a slab right now. And I think just given the topography from the street to the finished floor elevation of the lot, existing grade, I think that front porch would look nice if the front was on a few piers. But again, it's something that can be, conditional or condition of the approval if it's something y'all want to entertain.
Actually, I think it would make it look more like a Creole cottage.
I agree.
I agree with Diane.
I agree. Also.
And that is something we could also, along with the windows, delegate to staff approval if we're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay. All right, more questions or discussion? All right. Do I hear a motion to approve POA 588 with the condition that the windows on, I just wrote down left elevation, and the piers under the porch being delegated to staff approval?
And there would have to be a railing, correct?
That's...
No?
I don't think for 2 feet there's a railing.
Okay. All right.
If that were to come up, that would come out of building for code compliance, and I think at that point we'd probably bring it back to you guys.
Okay. Sounds good.
But it's on,
Diane, you were saying?
yeah, staff recommendations also recommend on condition that all windows and doors will be true. If you read that
true or simulated divided light, just like with Corey's.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. So a third condition that the windows and doors be true or simulated divided light. So do I hear a motion to approve with those conditions?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
3 seconds.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
See you, Jay.
All right, 588 is approved. And next on the agenda, we have case number 592, James Ferguson, 1507 Johnson Avenue, and this is replacing of existing windows.
So Barbara Ferguson is here to speak on that. Barbara?
Mike.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Okay. My name is Barbara Ferguson. My husband Jim and I bought our home at 1507 Johnson about 21 years ago. I'm a realtor and member of the Oxford board, and we're presently living in Senatobia but considering moving permanently to Oxford. We purchased custom-made windows for our home to replace the old windows for safety reasons and energy efficiency. We bought vinyl as wood was cost prohibitive. We wouldn't have done this. We just didn't know any better. And now we bought these windows, and we just thought we could buy the windows and that y'all would give us a permit to put them in. Now we have a big dilemma because we have windows that can't be returned because they're custom, and we can't install them, so we're stuck. The windows are the same color, which is an almond, as is in the house currently. They look the same, other than I I know if you walk right up on a window and look at it, you can see that it's vinyl if you do that, but if you're not trained from the street, it looks just like it's a regular wood window. What we're asking for is some consideration here. Ideally, we would like to put all of the windows in the vinyl in the house, but would like to consider, if y'all would not consider that, allowing us to put windows in the sides and at the back of the home, our vinyl windows, and then we will put clad, or ideally clad, or wood, whatever y'all would let us do on the front, or either we're going to have to eat our windows. I sure would appreciate if y'all would consider this. That's pretty much it.
Got it. All right, discussion.
That sounds like a reasonable request to me, Mr. Jack.
The compromise of the.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not what we would prefer, but based on the circumstances the lady has described and her compromise of having our designated kind of windows on the front, to me that seems fair enough.
Is there a picture of the windows that have been purchased?
I do not have it with me. Kate has seen the window. She has seen it at the house. Kate, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Unfortunately, we just started the meeting right away when I got to the house, and I didn't take a photo of the windows.
Okay.
I assume you guys read the staff report. So the main issue is the grill between the glass muttons. I mean, all of the profiles are off compared to the existing window, but the big issue is that it's not an extruded mutton. They're basically a flat mutton. And
between windows, you're saying?
Ma'am?
Between glass? The muttons are between the glass?
Right.
So snap out, is that?
They're not snap out. They're fixed there in between the glass, just a flat strip, basically.
Okay, and so they don't stick out on the exterior.
Right, and I'll put up for you guys the photos of the existing windows again. And as I'm sure you noticed, those are underneath a storm window in the photos.
And we are going to take, I know y'all don't like storm windows, we're taking those off out.
Actually, Barbara, the guidelines do allow for storms if you guys.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, if we do end up reaching some sort of different approval here, and you wanted to propose storm windows, there are some that are approvable. It would depend on the make.
Okay. Well, we'll cross that bridge after we get through this, if we can get through this. And we will do, I mean, whatever y'all tell us to do on the front, we will be happy to do that. I just, because you're really not going to see the other windows on the house.
My main concern is protecting the board if this comes up again, because we will be making an exception, and I think we need, if we do approve only putting the windows up on the front and allowing the purchase windows on the side and the back, then I think we need to word it in a way that protects this board, or we might have applicants in the future purchase merchandise and then say, well, you have a history of doing this. So I just don't like us being painted in a corner without having some way that we can justify why we're doing this, other than the immense sympathy that we have for Barbara, who has made this purchase. I mean, we want to work with everybody, but I think we're going to have a tough one to figure out how we need this worded.
Kate or Ben, is there a guideline that gives us general discretion to grant variance from specific guidelines? I should have brought my book and I didn't.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a specific provision that would grant that, Jacob, but, you know, at the end of the day, I think they're guidelines. I mean, this commission does its best to uphold the guidelines and the decision that it makes, and, you know, I completely understand the circumstance that y'all are in, and I think Diane, you know, makes a very good point to, you know, how to protect, you know, the commission. Although, you know, this is, you know, maybe it could be used as a tactic in the future. However, you know, I think in this situation it's a little different. I think you know, it's nice to hear an applicant come to the table and at least with an idea of, hey, come meet us halfway. And you know, I think the circumstances of this case are very difficult. I think the commission has only been in this situation a couple times that I can recall in the last maybe 6 years. You know, I think you make if you're willing to consider a compromise or something, I think you be explicit in your rationale of why you're choosing to do this given the circumstances, and you do that, or you don't. And you know, unfortunately, sometimes you're tasked with making difficult decisions. It's unfortunate, but you know, then you have to protect the design guidelines in the commission though too. So, but you know, I think you know, Ms. Ferguson, I think, you know, it's very you know, I understand the position that you're in, and I really appreciate you coming here and at least having an alternative scenario for the commission to consider.
I think we are, you know. I understand y'all's position. I do. You know, I guess we got the cart before the horse. As I said, I'm a realtor, and I'm on the Oxford board and the North board, and I work in the historical district a lot in Senatobia, and I just didn't. I just went before the board and had windows put in a historical home that were vinyl, and never crossed my mind that we could not use vinyl. It's just, you know, just a mistake. It's an expensive mistake.
I have a few remarks. First of all, I think Ms. Ferguson has been about as respectful an applicant as I've witnessed in my short tenure on the board thus far, and I don't suspect her for a second of intentionally buying non-refundable windows and asking for forgiveness instead of permission, and in fact she's bought them and is asking permission before installing them. And so I think of us as kind of the trier of fact here, if I were to use a trials analogy, and we're charged with assessing the credibility of the witness. And I believe Ms. Ferguson, and she made you know, an innocent mistake in purchasing windows that don't comport with the guidelines. And so I think the policy concern is that people in the future will start going and just buying whatever they want to do, and then just saying, oh, whoops, I'm in a real bind, I can't refund them. And so I think if we were to take the approach that we simply believe Ms. Ferguson, I think she said she's from Senatobia.
I am. And if it makes you feeling better, you know, that y'all can hopefully trust me. Our daughter, Katie Lovelace and Dee Lovelace, live in Oxford, and I know y'all all know them because they just redid their house. So I don't know, you know, all I can say is your reputation precedes you, and I certainly don't want to ruin my reputation by telling lies. And we just made a royal screw up. That's all.
So if Miss Ferguson is for some crazy reason taking us for a ride and fooling us all, I'm not sure it's to the detriment of this board nor of Oxford in general. So I think this is one where we can depart from the guidelines. I don't have a real grasp of what the new windows will look like, but it seems like no one else has huge concerns about it.
This is Virginia. Go ahead.
No, those are my only thoughts of if we had to make some specific finding on the record as to why we're departing, so that we're not, pigeonholing ourselves in the future.
I have a remark. I concur. From past experience, we have made exceptions in the past. Diane, I certainly absolutely understand your concerns. I think the simple premise that each case is an individual case and that we make a decision each time based upon an individual case is how we protect ourselves in this instance. So I'm in agreement that we extend grace and mercy at this point. We have done it in the past. We've done it for more egregious things that were done and really less honest ones that we felt like we just had to go ahead and approve. And so I think our protection is that we make a decision on an individual basis on each case. And so that gives me some comfort in making exceptions.
This is Virginia. I just wanted to say that I don't think there was any ill intent with the windows, but I honestly do have a problem with vinyl windows in the historic district. That's one of those things that I feel very strongly about, and I think Kate feels very strongly about it too. When we've made a compromise on a window before, and I feel like, we made a compromise on the 512 where we asked them to keep the original wood windows on the front, and we let them put new, but they were clad windows, so it was something that was in the design guidelines to begin with. We weren't going outside of it. So personally, I do have a problem with the vinyl windows, and I can't support them.
How many vinyl windows are there going to be?
I can pull up the quote.
I think it's 8. I think it's.
And would they all be on the rear of the house?
So the original proposal called for 18 new windows, and that was all of the windows at the property. Correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara, but I believe when I talked to Jim.
You're correct. There are, let's see, we've got.
You got 6 on the front, or
and
you include the left side.
And so, those, and there's some under the carport, and on the other side, you can't even see them from, the street. I'm trying to remember. It was 18.
Yeah, it looks like there are 4 windows on the front facade.
Yeah, there's 3, a big window that has 3, and then there's a small window to the left of the door.
Right.
And so those, wait a minute, there's a sunroom that's got 3 right there too, Kate.
So it looks like there's 7 or 8 windows on the front?
There's 6, 7 or 8 on the front.
Yeah.
Yes.
It looks like there's 7.
But she's willing to replace those, correct?
Right.
Well, we will, we're just, the only thing I can think that if y'all are willing to work with us, if you just let us, we'll do what y'all want us to do, whatever you tell us to do on the front, and then on the sides, if you just let us put our vinyl in and in the back. That's what we're asking. I mean, we'll just have to, it may take us a while to get the front done, but we'll get it done. We will do that, yes. And we will do, I know Kate said something about the bar or something, and we'll make sure that whatever y'all want, it will be done correctly.
Are y'all considering any other improvements to the house at any time?
Yes, we are. We eventually would like to put some type of cover over the front door. We'd like to change out the front door. We also would like to change out the door by the garage. That's one of the projects that we're looking at. We have some things in mind that we'd like to do. We just have to do them just start at one point and just work from there.
Sure.
Absolutely, because like I said, we are considering making a permanent move to Oxford.
Hey, Ms. Ferguson, this has been Requette, and I'm gonna propose something at least for consideration or for discussion by the commission. I'm sure you're like every other person that's in the middle of a construction project, and you're trying to get this done as quick as possible, maybe tomorrow if you could. But it seems to me that there is some that the commission could could be served by having some additional information, including a picture of what the vinyl window looks like. That they may be willing, they may be willing to at least some commissioners may be willing to entertain an alternative scenario here. And so my question to you would be, would you be willing to consider tabling or postponing this request until our next meeting, which would be in September, to provide a picture of the windows, to provide maybe with some elements that would show maybe the sides, the front, the sides, and then the rear, and maybe your proposal could be to this many windows, X amount of windows, so that way the commission could take into full consideration your request.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, and I have a window in Oxford that I will be happy. We will bring it to y'all if you want it, or put it outside where you can come look at it. If you tell me, I'll do whatever y'all tell me. I just appreciate the ones who are willing to work with us, and hope that the other people will also when they see the window.
Well, my goal is not to kick the can down the road and to delay you terribly, but my goal would be to inform the commission so that way, they make a sound decision, whether it be a tough one or a hybrid.
Oh, I understand.
Yes.
Your position, and we're fine. We need to wait. We'll wait. And I will do whatever y'all would like. I will take pictures of the sides, both sides, the front, the back. And like I said, we have an actual window in our house, in the house in Oxford, that I would be happy to show it to any of you who are interested in looking at it. My husband and I, one of us will come over there, and you are welcome to look at it.
Let me just break in, and thank you, Ben. That's a good point. But just so we don't waste anybody's time, would it affect anybody's decision to see the window? Because I know what we're talking about. So would that affect anybody's decision one way or the other? Would you want that additional information, or does that change anything?
I'd like to see a rear view of the house to see where the windows.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. And so I had a question about do the rear windows, do they need replacing? Is that why you're doing this? What is the existing condition?
We can't open, the only windows that would possibly be open in the house would be on our, we did an addition, and we weren't in the historical district when we did it. We did an addition on our house when we purchased it. And the windows in that part have been replaced. And they are, I think they're vinyl. There's the existing house that was there. The windows, not one window open. Some of them are rotten. It's not cost effective to try to repair around there. They're just old, very, very, very old. And that's why we were replacing them, because if you wanted to get out of your house and your house was on fire, you might burn up trying to get out of the house. But
Camp, I looked at windows, and the back windows, whether they needed replacing or not, are not visual by anywhere. I mean, at all. A lot of the windows are in pretty bad shape.
Okay.
As the window sills.
Okay, thank you.
This is Jack. I don't know why we wouldn't go ahead and consider the question that with these modifications we've discussed now.
Okay. Anybody else? Have a feeling about whether we should wait or go ahead and make a decision now?
Just a thought, would it make any sense to grant the application in part as to back windows and table the remainder of it, or do we need to do it all at once?
I really don't see a need to do just
I don't see a need to do all that.
Okay.
Honest, I mean, I think it would just delay things.
Okay.
Anybody else, though? And especially if we did the compromise version and the windows that they put on the front would be subject to staff approval, and they would be within the guidelines, and so there wouldn't be a need for us to see them next month, if that makes sense.
Got you. Yep. Yeah.
And so we would need to specify that we would do that all across the front only, right? And the sides and the rear might be the vinyl windows, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Correct.
Other thoughts? A few of you we hadn't heard from. Joel, Commissioner Little. Is he here?
The only third option might be to add buttons that look correct to the existing windows.
Hey, we can't hear you. Could you maybe speak a little louder?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Better?
Now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was saying that you can buy muntins that are historically correct, good material, that have double-sided tape, and a proper installer could put them on there and fool everyone's eye with it.
So they would have that.
It's just a third way to do it.
Okay.
So we could possibly add that as a requirement of approving the vinyl windows. Is that what Joel's saying?
I think so.
Okay.
I certainly think you could explore that possibility.
Okay. Virginia, how do you feel about that?
I don't feel comfortable with vinyl windows. They just look different. They're very flat. I know they're supposed to be a double hung window, but it's not the same. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no,
And I will point out, that's a good suggestion by Joel if we're trying to make the vinyl windows more appropriate, but that is still, snap-in muttons are still recommended against in the design guidelines, so you're still going against the design guidelines when you recommend that type of mutton. But it could be a good, if you guys are looking to compromise, perhaps that would help the vinyl windows look more appropriate.
It seems like that would tie the whole house. If we did have clad or wood windows on the front, it might tie in a little better if they had the exterior snap-ins. Maybe. I mean, it might not be as obvious if the windows are different. Joel, is that kind of what would happen?
Yes. You got to look at the windows. Virginia's right. They tend to be very flat, and if they're too flat, it's going to make it very difficult.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. Somebody else talking. All right. Does somebody want to make a motion of some kind?
I would make the motion, this is Jack, that we approve the request with the modifications we've discussed, that the staff has approval for every window on the front of the house to conform with our guidelines, and that we accept the vinyl on the back and the side based on this individual situation and my belief that it's a sincere error and we can be comfortable approving the exception.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second that, Jay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
All right, so what case number are we? Case number 592 is approved as amended and subject to staff approval. So thank you, Ms. Ferguson.
I really appreciate this more than you know, and
well, thanks for
being a lot more careful what we do from now on. Now, let me ask one question before we go. You said what you called it, the Munson? Is that what it's called? Sorry, I know what it is. The little bar that goes. Right. All right. Was that in the proposal or not in the proposal?
It was not in stated in what we approved. No.
So
if you want to do it, and you think if you want to do it and think it would enhance the look, then you could do that with staff approval.
Okay.
And the front and the windows, the only condition is, oh, sorry, Barbara. So the condition is that the front windows will either be retained.
I just want to know.
Got it.
Right, where we go from here. Do we go ahead and have our windows installed on
the sides and the back? Yes.
Well, I mean, isn't that, how do you make sure that the agreement is fully kept if they just do the sides and the back and then say we no longer can afford to do anything in the front?
Well, then the original windows would be retained.
I'm sorry, say again?
Then the original windows would be retained, so that wouldn't violate any of the guidelines. And if they wanted to restore those front windows rather than repair, just because a window doesn't open doesn't mean that it can't be fixed. So if they wanted to go that route, that would be acceptable as well, rather than a new replacement. But if they do choose to replace, it will be with something that meets the design guidelines.
Okay, wonderful. Thank y'all. You don't know how much I appreciate it. I really, really do. Thank you very much. And, sir?
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Cut the baby in half.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm happy for that. Thank you.
No.
All right, so next on the agenda, we have a complimentary review. Marty and Candace Carr, this is on South 8th Street.
Jonathan, are you there?
Who have we got? Jonathan?
And Virginia will be recusing.
And so Virginia, you can sign off. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
I'm going to remove Barbara from the meeting.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all for a few minutes of your time tonight. I wanted to talk to you about the Carr House, which we reviewed and you guys approved for us in December, which was a renovation project and the addition on the back. We were going into this project with the understanding that it's an old house and it was going to need a lot of work. And we were doing a lot of things to try to repair what we felt like was a pretty bad addition that had happened to it in the past. We knew that a lot of the exterior finishes, the siding and the windows and things like interior molding and so forth really weren't there. But we knew that there was an old house in there, and this client has done a lot of renovation projects throughout the years and was familiar with this process. So we wanted to work with what we had. However, as we've gotten into this thing a few months now, we have just discovered lots and lots of issues that are causing us to be sort of disheartened about what we're able to accomplish here. There's a lot of construction issues with the original structure itself. A lot of the materials, once we took the wall surfaces down, we discovered that the framing, walls, floors, and ceilings are sort of made up of undersized materials that don't meet code now, and maybe they didn't even meet code then, but a lot of them are spliced together to make whole members, which is certainly not allowed today. And so much of it is rotten, sort of an alarming amount of it is rotten. Part of the floor structure rotten, and there's some pictures that you'll have in your packet on that, is because the clearance between the bottom of the framing and the ground isn't adequate. And not only is it not adequate, the whole crawl space level is lower than all of the grade around the house. So water, as you know, just goes to that low spot, so it's getting in under the house. That can be dug out, and that's what we were planning to do. But just, even fixing that waterproofing issue alone was quoted out as $18,000 to do the proper kind of water foundation we need. But then the floor structure itself at this point pretty much needs to be entirely replaced. The foundation, which had major alterations, has to be entirely replaced. The ceiling members, which are, as I said, are inadequate to meet code, all have to be added to support the new ceiling materials. Roof framing is inadequate, and so the list sort of goes on and on. In the addition, in the back, there is a second story, and so we were planning to have a kind of bunk room second story up there. When we took all the finishes down and were able to see what that ceiling/floor is made of, it's made of more spliced 2x8s, which of course doesn't meet code. So it's like everywhere we turn, we're having to pretty much replace every single, piece of material in the whole house. So it just sort of brings us to this point where we, wanted to have a serious conversation about how realistic is it to continue rebuilding this house one, member at a time versus just admitting, defeat and scraping it and starting over. As I mentioned in my comments, though, our plan, if we would be allowed to restart on this house, would be to build it back according to the original plans. We're not, looking to, change the house at this point. We kind of wanted the house we were trying to renovate and accomplish. There probably would be a couple of things that if we really did have a clean slate, we'd want to tweak, but nothing very major. And of course, we'd have to review those when that time comes. But we're sort of at this crossroads where we just keep biting the bullet and throwing everything in the trash, where the frustration comes in is it just takes a lot of labor to tear out all of that rotten material and build it back, stick at a time, since we don't really have permission to kind of just tear it down in huge sections and rebuild it. And because the foundation is one of the worst things, just starting from the ground up, ensures that a client who's investing, in this street and in a project like this is going to have a house that's, warrants the effort they put into it and will last. So I just wanted to bring it before you. Obviously, we didn't start this conversation in time for you to have any voting opinion tonight, but I just kind of wanted to open up this conversation with you guys, share with you our dilemma, invite you to stop by there if that's something you can do, and just get some advice from you on what we should do. Even the back half, which I said was an addition, well, the back half and the entire northern side of the house were additions. There's lots of rotten issues with those, but the back of the house is 2.5 inches out of level. Even to fix the part that we expected to be, perfectly good, is causing us issues as well. If we could go back to the first page, thank you for whoever's scrolling these pictures, but if we could go up a minute. One more. So this picture on the left, we're in the front room of the house. That beam that you see sort of mid-picture between the two windows on your left, that is the original exterior wall. And everything you see away from you towards the back of the picture is all part of that original addition. That addition was all the way down the north side of the house. And you can see the concrete block foundation in the new part. But even still, the clearance, as you can see, if you look sort of to the left, it's only, a little over a block and the block is 8 inches tall, between the ground and that framing. And all of that was just completely rotten. And as you scroll through and look at other pictures, you see the floor framing members, which are, gone, and all kinds of other issues with framing. These two pictures are showing you the main support beam that was holding all of the otherwise rotten floor through the middle of the original house. It's nothing left of it. You can't even, in a lot of cases, we expected to go in and just add new material onto what was what was there to strengthen it, but there's nothing here. There's another picture, I think it's on the next page, which shows you just kind of the mindset of how this house was built. The piers that the house is sitting on are, in some cases, just loose stacked bricks that don't have any kind of footing or any kind of support. It's a mess. That's my summary of it. And we can keep going, renovating. It's really kind of ridiculous as it is, and I really wanted to get you guys to kind of give me some feedback on how you saw this dilemma.
I actually thought it was very unsafe. I went into it as far as I felt comfortable, which wasn't very far. It is pretty bad.
It was deceiving on the outside because whatever the siding was on the house was just completely gone. It was replaced, I think, in the 60s by a siding that made it look like it was in better condition than it really was. But the house, as I said earlier, it was really stripped of any character-defining elements. It didn't have, all of the interior molding was new material. It had sheetrock. It didn't have old wall, boards. And even the whole front porch is new-ish, and the front wall of the house is all new framing. There's really very little of the old house even inside of this thing, which was kind of insulting to us when we got it all opened up and we're ready to gear up for our saving this house and renovation project, and then just sort of nothing left of it.
I was really shocked at the condition of the piers.
Yeah.
Jonathan, this is Jack. How would you compare this house to the Dunbar House?
The difference in the Dunbar House and this house is that the Dunbar House was well built in the first place, and it had a lot of deterioration, especially on the backside. There was a place where a tree had fallen or something, and the roof had caved in, and water had been leaking in, and the toilet was sitting on the ground, and all of that was rotten. But once we peeled all of that back part back and got to the front part, there was great framing, and the house, we just put new finishes on the outside of that framing for over half of that house, and then we reconfigured the back, so there's a lot of new stuff back there. But my point is, it was well built to begin with. This house was, terribly built to begin with, and that's not apparent. Some of it might have been apparent in the attic if it were more visible than it had been. But opening up the walls and the flooring to understand the extent of the rot, it wasn't really possible until we got, a couple of months into this thing. But what we've uncovered is a house that wasn't well built. And it's not as old as the Dunbar House either. So the material we found there was rough sawn, full thickness material. Here, it's more ordinary, newer, scaled material that's just been kind of hacked on and shored up over the years, but in no better methods than the original construction.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, this is Joel. If you get approval for this, do you intend to raise it up, put it on a raised slab, or raised conventional, or a slab on grade?
Well, we're debating that. The client, who, as I mentioned, has had a lot of experience renovating historic properties in other places, didn't really understand the concept of an elevated slab. We were pitching that as a possibility just because of the way the lot, which is flat-ish, is completely dug out underneath the house. We'd have to raise the house up if we filled in the footprint of the crawl space and then built a conventional foundation on top of it, which would get it, 3 feet off the ground. And we were trying not to get it a lot higher off the ground than what it is now. So we are proposing in one of the scenarios to put it back with a slab, but with brick veneer underneath, just kind of a complicated detail to overhang the slab so that you can put in brick in the same way that a wood-framed house has a brick veneer around its foundation. But we've been discussing those things. But, all of our conversations about the what-ifs have been pretty preliminary because at this point we only have approval to renovate, and we're on course to renovate. It's just, every day that goes by just seems like we're wasting their money. And so we haven't, until we had this conversation tonight, no one has really kind of talked about too many of the details about how a new house might be built, other than from this car to say, I really want the house that we've already designed, except I might want to put this wall 2 feet over now that I'm not trying to keep an existing wall and not going to, tweak the room sizes a little bit on the inside, because according to our plan, we were working around a lot of interior walls and sort of trying to keep the fabric of the house the same. Well, those walls have to be taken down and replaced anyway, so we might as well put them back, in a slightly different configuration that makes more sense. But the intention on the outside is that this house looks, very similar. One of the things that she has discussed is she's never really loved the way the front porch is attached to the house, and if the main front 2 rooms of the house were just a little bit taller, the roof structure of the porch could connect to the eave better or tuck in under the eave. And right now the front porch roof sort of rides halfway up the front of the house because the house isn't very tall and the porch roof, is more dominant. But again, none of that is anything that I can show you tonight. And if we were to go forward with this idea of starting with a new construction, then I'd come back next month and show it to you as it is. But our goal is for you not to think it looks very different than what you've already approved.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry.
And so this is a complimentary review, so we won't be voting tonight, but if we could help Mr. Mass, what we would, where we're leaning, so that, when he comes back next month, it would be an application for demolition along with maybe new plans or not. So I don't know if anybody had some thoughts they could give him where, just where you're leaning, how you feel about it.
So what he's asking for is demolition, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Or if we would be willing to, yeah. To approve it.
I would, as you know, I'm pretty much a stickler against demolition, and I hang on to the very last, but this looks like it does certainly warrant demolition. It would be important to me, of course, what your proposals come back with is, Jonathan, and you were respectful, and I believe you will be, that that's a fairly small cottage-looking structure now, and not to come back with something that would be very different from it, because that would be somewhat dismaying for me. I know to try to deal with that with you. So as long as this is a one-story, right? And your plan would be to come back with another one-story. Is that correct?
Technically, it's a story and a half. There's a bunk room kind of space that's under the roof on the back half. But yes, what we would come back with is going to look, as I said, just like it looks in the proposal, which is the house you see in these pictures, plus an addition on the side, and then closing a previous carport.
Yeah, and that's encouraging. And the square footage of the new proposed house would not be exceptionally larger than the existing home?
No, probably none.
Okay, that's good news. Thank you.
Well,
it's easiest for me if we take my existing drawings and just rebuild it, just like it is. But as I said, we probably would, just out of, because we can, probably tweak a couple of things, but we don't really need to redesign it.
But just to clarify, Camp, we had approved a new design that did have a little more square footage than the existing house.
Yeah.
And so what would come back would be similar to what we approved, not exactly what's there right now. Just to be clear.
So yeah, that was what I was intending to say. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. And I knew that, and I was thinking though, but you would have the opportunity to come back with a new proposal. But you're saying you're with your original proposal. It sounds like.
Yes.
But it might be tweaked a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Other thoughts? Anyone opposed to the demolition request? Okay.
I think Joel was chiming in there. Joel, did you have a comment?
I was just going to say, I think that as long as he stays close to what he started with, we're going to be pretty sympathetic as a commission. I of course, speak only for myself, but it sounds that way.
I agree with Joel.
Thank you. That's just what I needed to kind of have some understanding about before spending the next, couple of weeks trying to get a new packet to you and, be on the agenda again. So.
You got to get past these linebackers, before you can make the run. So, yeah.
Are you our linebacker?
Yes.
Yeah. I would like to add too that this demolition request is different from the ones we usually get in that this is clearly a good faith effort to save the house. I mean, the owners have already spent a lot of time and effort, carefully removing everything that they, was bad, and it ended up being the whole house was bad. So that is also something.
We gave it a good college try, and no one's too happy about having to stop and maybe start over. But
I will say again, I appreciate you giving it a good try and trying to save that. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. input. I appreciate
Well, thank you. We appreciate you. All right. So we are at the end. So do I hear, and thank you, Mr. Maddox, and do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Kathy.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
We're out.
Aye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Be safe. How do you get out?
This meeting